Museum, but before we get into that, let's talk about a little whiskey. What have we chosen to drink today?
So I've chosen a Scotch. I have the Lafroig 10-year. It's one of my favorites. I tend to like it super peaty, which means, for those who don't know, that means it's pretty smoky. I tend to like drinking whiskey that reminds me of drinking fire.
All right. Now, have you drinking much fire in the past?
I try to do my best not to.
Okay, yeah.
I'm a redhead. We tend to like to stick with the fiery things.
Yeah, and I hear you guys suck the souls out of the people.
We do our best.
All right. Well, I'm pretty safe because I don't know that I actually have one anymore. So I've made a lot of deals that probably doesn't belong to me now. So I think I'm pretty safe for today. But anyways, let's before this gets too dark right off the bat, why don't we go ahead and just cheers? So cheers to you, and let's have a great show. So again, the flavor that you mentioned in that definitely can pull out those wonderful flavors. I don't necessarily like to drink fire, but that is a very nice flavor complex that you picked out. So nice job. All right. Let's get into some questions. So the first thing I think is always important to start off with is for people who don't really know, who may not be in this area, can you give us a little bit of history about Cayuga Museum?
Sure. So the Cayuga Museum, we've been around for almost 100 years. The museum first started in 1936 in the old Willard Case Mansion. The mansion was actually built in 1836, so it had been around for 100 years when the museum moved in there. The Willards got their fortune out of cornstarch, and actually, the most prominent of the Willards was a physician himself, which we actually have a new exhibit in the museum right now about 19th century medicine.
Oh, very interesting. Yes. So I'm guessing that it's probably even better quality than we have today. I mean, the technology back then must have been amazing compared
Absolutely.
to
Totally no creepy torture instruments in that room at all.
None. Wow. Mm-hmm. So what if someone goes to take a look at it, what would you suggest the one piece in there that they definitely make sure that they try to look at? What kind of creeped you out the most to think that was being used in the past?
The one I don't like is the hand or the foot operated tooth drill. So for dentistry in the 19th century, generally not a fun time.
Someone say it's not fun now.
I mean, I don't know if anyone's ever truly enjoyed going to the dentist. That is a fair point.
Right. So you did mention that it was the Willard Case Mansion.
Yep.
That fascinates me because I go there, and honestly, I don't think I ever really put two together that's who actually owned it. So Can you give a little history as far as that? How it did they build it? Did it come into their possession another way?
Sure. So the Willards were the ones who built it in the 1830s, and the Cases came into ownership of it around the turn of the 20th century. They were cousins of the Willards. Actually, once it got into, so the last owner of the mansion, Theodore Case, didn't actually really use it as much as a primary residence. There's already the Case Mansion down on Genesee Street, and the way that Case really used the space was for invention. He used the mansion and its facilities for all of his different experimentations that he wanted to do. So the mansion would be used for this. The greenhouses, which the primary greenhouse in the back was converted into a working laboratory, which is the Case Research Laboratory.
Okay, and what type of research was done there?
Primarily, I'd say he falls more on the physics side of things, just based on the major innovations. He starts off with lots of experimentation with electricity.
Okay.
At turn of the 20th century, that's the new steam power. It's what everybody is fascinated with.
And that could be a whole story right there because if you ask me, we're using the wrong inventor's electricity. But we will not get too deep into that as you sit there shaking your head in agreement with me. But
I will tell you, we do have Edison-style bulbs lighting that laboratory. We try to be as authentic as possible in there with the scenery.
Right, nice.
But But with the production of electricity, there's many people who are working in different ways to produce it. So his start really comes in experimentation with light and sound and how those can work in with electricity. And with the light, he starts patenting photovoltaic cells, so solar panels. Actually had some early patents on his own versions of solar panels.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so from that experimentation with light and sound, he develops an infrared. So this is Theodore Case, but develops a infrared communication system. This comes in about the time as World War I is dawning, and he gets it sold to the Navy. Because of that, he can't patent that technology because they don't want it falling into German hands. But this infrared communication, for those who don't know, infrared is not visible on the light spectrum. So it's an undetectable communication system that converts into essentially Morse code. If you come to the laboratory, I can show you the panels that go over the lighting. They look like your standard spotlights, but you wouldn't be able to see it. And when they were experimenting on this, he'd take it on top of the mansion and have one of his workers in the laboratory go to a second mansion that's down the road. And they'd essentially test communicating with each other. Not exactly the most down-to-earth stories, I'll admit.
I just like that. Oh, go to the other mansion. Let's test this out. Can you go to the other mansion for me? I would love to be able to say that to somebody working for me, but that is a doubtful statement I'll ever make.
Well, and that's the story of quite a few of the inventors of, especially the turn of the 20th century. The only way you really had the time to do the experimentation was to be independently wealthy and have the money to have the time. But it's kind of funny that he's inventing these things in his greenhouse in a laboratory back there, because I think it kind of falls into that classic American story of these inventors going into their garages and inventing this life-changing, world-changing technology.
Right, which happens a lot. Yeah.
So from that infrared communication system, once World War I comes around, sonar and radio really start taking over. But this is when Case is also working with sound film. So for those who don't know, the Case Research Laboratory is where sound film was really perfected, and we claim to be the birthplace of it because, frankly, it's true. In the same way that James Watt is considered to be the creator of, the main instigator of steam technology getting out into the public, this is what Theodore Case does for sound film. At the time, sound film is this gimmicky technology that you really kind of would see at a state fair. Essentially, the only way it was being done was playing a record at the same time as film. So you'd have really kind of off-timed sound with the images. It'd be like a delayed YouTube video, but think that's like what you're always seeing with sound film. So really annoying. Nobody in the art world wanted to do anything with it. They liked this silent film industry. So this really had to be something that was worked on, and the key to it were these bulbs that Theodore Case came up with, that essentially this type of flashing that it would do, it would take the sound that was being produced in front of it and convert it into light energy directly onto the film itself. This was efficient. It was cheap to make. It also sounded better, and this really revolutionizes the system. So the way that this starts to really take off, they have to start promoting it actively as a system. So they'll, start off in local upstate New York areas. They were in close partnership with Kodak up in Rochester to get the film itself.
Right.
And then they go to Syracuse and go to theaters and, give them the technology. The key to this was the bulb. So him having the patent on it allows him to have some of that ownership of it. Although a big part of the story is that he's not a very big self-promoter, which he enters into this industry that's all about promotion. So that's a lot of the reason why y'all probably not heard of Theodore Case.
Well, that's the interesting thing. Yeah, most people probably haven't, but if you live in this area, you know exactly who he is.
Exactly. So it really becomes a part of this, this narrative that he's really just kind of locally known.
Nice.
But the promotion is what really makes this take off. They'll take newsreels, or news stories of the day, and produce newsreels. So for a while, you'd have a silent film feature, but with sound newsreels ahead of them, and this is how people start engaging with sound film. The first major full-length newsreel that they produce is that really takes off is Charles Lindbergh's Crossing of the Atlantic.
Okay.
They were filming it in sound, and a lot of people didn't know that they were filming it in sound. So when they would play it back, they'd hear themselves, and there'd be this major, these reactions. This is what they were capitalizing on. They filmed the first sitting president to be on sound film. That's Calvin Coolidge, which is a little bit ironic if you know anything about Coolidge, who was famously known for not liking to talk very much.
Right.
And he was very grumpy and surly the entire time. Case's notes on that are very upset with that.
Right. Yeah, I could see why. I mean, you want to promote this new technology, and what better way than with the president, especially back then. But
well, Case voted for him, so he felt a little bit guilty.
Oh, okay. Well, all right. Yeah. That's another little thorn in the side, if you will, I would guess. But well, that's really a fascinating story. I didn't realize the depth of it and some of the technology there. I think sometimes when you visit these places, you're looking at the exhibits, but you forget to really go into detail with the stories that are behind it. So I definitely appreciate you taking time to give us a little bit of that background.
Yeah.
We definitely have some other questions for you about it. So I think unless there's something really you think would be really interesting along with that story.
I mean, just to recognize that all of this inventing and all of this story is happening here in this facility in Auburn,
which is not an impressive looking facility when you're there, really. I mean, it's a building from 150 years ago. So it really is quite a feat to see the technology that came out of there, for sure. Now, one of my favorite things about the museum is I think I've seen everyone this year, the Immersion Artist Series. Some of the talent that has been there, well, not some, all of the talent that's been there has been phenomenal. I mean, the work that the museum's been able to bring in, how did that get a start? When did this start? How did it start, and how is the decision process made?
Yeah, so that was really a brainchild of Kirsten Wise, the current executive director. The program was just started last year, and it was just so successful in really creating this community project at the museum that we felt we had to do it again this year. The way the decision-making process is done is we'll take a panel of folks from other institutions, and we'll send a call out to artists to submit work, and it'll be judged by that panel. And this year we did 9 artists, so they had to pick 9 out of dozens, hundreds of people submitting their art.
Right. Yep.
So, and there's so much talent; it's a difficult decision to narrow it down. But I think it's just fascinating as a program. Every month we have a new artist presenting their work in there, and I'm glad that you love it so much, because it's all about community engagement. That's what we are as an institution. That's who we are.
Actually, part of the reason this podcast was started is partly because of that. I already had it in my mind, but I was sitting in there with Jesse and Kirsten, and they were talking, and we were just, I forget what artist, but absolutely mind-blowing. I absolutely loved it, and I was a little disappointed that more people weren't experiencing how great this was. And I realized, man, this idea I have, I could really help to promote some of this stuff in the area. And so actually the Emerging Artist Series is one of the reasons why I actually decided that I really did need to push forward on this. I think the work there is fantastic. Actually, my old boss, he was trying to get me to submit work, but I